Welcome back to Maritime Pakistan. Today, we're looking at the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, the framework known as MARPOL, that sets the mandatory environmental standards for every vessel on the high seas. In the 1970s, global shipping exploded. Fleets were moving more cargo than ever before, but this rapid expansion came with a severe environmental cost. The ocean was often treated as an infinite disposal site for operational waste and hazardous byproducts. The breaking point hit between 1976 and 1977. A devastating series of tanker accidents left massive ships broken in half, spilling millions of gallons of crude oil into rough, uncontrollable seas. At the time, the world lacked a unified legal framework to stop this. Authorities needed a way to halt both these massive accidental oil spills and the quiet daily disposal of garbage and chemicals over the rails of thousands of working vessels. This dual threat forced the International Maritime Organization into action. They drafted the MARPOL Convention in 1973 and expanded it in 1978, establishing an evolving, six-part international shield to police the maritime industry. To understand how these rules work, look at the anatomy of the ship itself. MARPOL is organized into 6 specific technical annexes, each targeting a different source of potential pollution. We start with the hull. Annex I targets oil pollution. A critical 1992 amendment mandated that tankers be built with double hulls, creating a secondary steel buffer to prevent cargo from leaking during a grounding or collision. Moving into the cargo tanks, Annex II dictates how ships handle over 250 different toxic liquid chemicals. Discharging the residues of these substances is strictly prohibited within 12 nautical miles of the nearest land. If hazardous cargo is carried in individual packages or containers, it falls under Annex III. This section utilizes the IMDG code to enforce strict standards on how these materials are labeled and stowed to ensure they don't end up overboard. By setting these specific requirements for the ship's structure and cargo handling, these first 3 annexes force the industry to move away from simply reacting to spills and toward actively building prevention into a ship's design. Beyond the cargo holds, regulators must account for the thousands of people living on board these vessels and the daily waste their presence generates. Annex IV controls human sewage. If a ship uses an approved treatment plant, it can discharge treated sewage 3 nautical miles from land. Without that treatment system, a ship must be at least 12 miles out. Then there is the ship's everyday trash. Annex V establishes distance requirements for dumping food waste or paper, but it is most famous for a total global ban on throwing any form of plastic into the sea. Finally, we reach the top of the vessel. Annex VI was added later, in 2005, to address the invisible emissions coming from a ship's engines. This protocol places strict, monitored limits on the sulfur oxides and nitrogen oxides that can legally escape a ship's exhaust funnel, particularly in designated emission control areas. Under MARPOL, the daily exhaust and waste produced by a crew are policed with the same legal weight as the hazardous cargo in the holds. MARPOL also recognizes that some regions are more vulnerable than others. It designates special areas, like the Mediterranean and the Baltic Sea, where even stricter discharge rules are enforced to protect sensitive ecosystems. The treaty continues to adapt to new environmental challenges. In 2011, mandatory energy efficiency measures were adopted to target the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions across the entire global fleet. As shipping volumes increase, MARPOL legally binds the industry to constant technological updates, making environmental compliance a baseline requirement for international trade. Which part of maritime law should we look at next? Let us know your questions in the comments below. MARPOL remains the primary mechanism for protecting the marine environment, ensuring that the growth of global shipping is managed through a framework of mandatory enforceable protection.